Good evening. So, there's quite a few of you were here last year, and I did a talk about Bigfoot from a Native American perspective, having spent some time on the reservation in 2006, and had some very, very good insights while I was over there. So today I'm going to talk about the Dogman. Now, through reading about Bigfoot, quite a few years ago, about 10, 12 years ago, started reading these things about this these bipedal dog-like creatures that were appearing very, very occasionally in certain geographical areas. Like Nathan said this morning with the talk that he did about, there's this whole range of now big hairy monsters, some of whom, the majority of whom are some sort of like human-like or ape-like, like Bigfoot, but there's this whole range of others that aren't as such. When I was reading through this, it put me in touch with the books of a woman called Linda Godfrey. Now, she's written 3 books today. The first one was called The Beast of Bray Road. The second one she called The Hunting the American Werewolf. And the third one was The Michigan Dogman, which is the one I've actually got at home. Just managed to get back from a friend of mine after I lent it to him 4 years ago and chased him up for it the other day. So the Beast of Bray Road is where it starts coming through. Now, Bray Road is in the state of Wisconsin, in the northern Midwest, up near the border with Canada. I have been through the area on a Greyhound bus in winter. It's very bleak, very woody, very watery, very swampy. So very, very different from sort of like the swamps of the bayous of Louisiana, not tropical. It's very, very damp and cold sort of body. And that's that and the neighbouring states of Michigan and across the border in Canada is where most of the sightings seem to occur, although they are sporadically around other parts of the US. General sort of like description of the creature is has sticky up ears like a wolf, bad smell, muzzle. They switch in terms of when they move between 2 legs and 4 legs. They tend to be, on average, not quite as tall as Bigfoot. They sort of average around 6 foot to 7 foot. They also tend to have, although they have the muscular physique similar to Bigfoot, it's much more leaner, much more tapered, sort of more of a human bodybuilder sort, as opposed to the big, blocky, muscular side of Bigfoot. They also reported to have a hunchback a lot of the time, a bit like from American Werewolf in London, when he's like quite hunched over. So again, that's quite a common thing. They also reported to grin a lot. Now, whether that's actually a description of something baring its teeth or not, I don't know. But I have a lot of people who report about these animals grinning at them. And not in a particularly nice way. It's actually seen as sort of like there's a malevolence to it. The common feelings that a lot of people have is actually say that they feel that Dogman does not mean well. It's not coming from a good place. It's very, very. People that will often report about sort of like some new agey types, and even not new agey types, will talk about Bigfoot sort of like meaning well, feeling coming across as quite harmless or generally indifferent. That is not the feeling that the Dogman generally gives to people. There tends to be more of a nastiness to it. But there's also lots of indifference from them. And there are occasional bits of, like, I've read very few reports where somebody has said that they felt these big feelings of sort of like safety or I am not going to hurt you coming from Dogman. But they do seem to be the aberration rather than the norm. What people also report is that it's very much a physical being that they're coming up against. They're not talking about a ethereal, spiritual being. They're very much talking about a physical entity. Again, Nathan mentioned today in his talk about the book by Patrick Huey and Lauren Coleman about mystery primates worldwide. And within that, there's this whole talk, and Nathan talked about devil monkeys. Now, within that group of devil monkeys, there's a lot of descriptions and that give these monkeys baboon-like features. Now, if you think about it, quite often was I know the ancient Greeks used to refer to baboons as the dog-faced men when they used to, get them out of Africa via the Egyptians, wherever they were. This whole thing about that, baboons having quite dog-like faces, and I sort of wonder whether that might have some bearing. So some of these devil monkeys may actually be smaller versions of the dogman. Because of my interest in sort of Native American history, culture, spirituality, and things like that, I'm very, very keen to think about, is there a big link between Native American belief and the existence of the dogman? In all fairness, there's very, very little there. It's not like Bigfoot, where you can more or less go to any Native American nation and find some connection with Bigfoot that goes back hundreds and probably thousands of years. There really isn't that you will find that, not obviously with the dogman. Saying that, I was reading something about one area of Michigan. It's called the Manistee region, where there's a lot of encounters, sightings of dogman. Now, Manistee is an Anishinaabe Indian term, and it means spirit of the forest. Now, spirit in a Native American term, the word, depending on which tribe, but spirit can also mean whereas within a Western context, it's generally much more of an ethereal, intangible sort of presence. It's that, but it can also be a very, very physical thing from a Native American context. So therefore it could be that, does dogman, is dogman in this Manistee region because it's from a spirit that has been there from a Native American perspective for many years. So, the Beast of the Bray Road, where it all began. The first documented report was in 1936, then there was another one in 1964, and then there was one in 1972. Now, I hasten to add that these are documented. This is not to say that they were only ever seen and witnessed in those, but this is where in sort of the public record where they come from. The real kick-off seemed to be in 1989, near a place called Elkhorn, which is, and Bray Road is a part of Elkhorn, which is in Wisconsin. So it happened, the first sighting, October the 31st, Halloween, 1989. Now, it happened with a young woman called Doris Dean Gibson. She was driving along this road at night, early in the evening, but it was already dark, it's October, driving along, and she felt like she went over something, hit it, and then came down. So she pulled over, wanted to see if the car was damaged. She can't remember anything running out, so she's not aware if she hit or anything. So she got out of the car, went to look at her car, was aware of these heavy footsteps running behind her, looked, and to see this large hairy form running towards her at speed. She jumped back in the car and then took off. It was a wet night. She was aware that something at least grabbed or tried to jump on the back of the car. Fortunately, it slipped off because it was so wet, and she got home. What she did next strikes me as something strange. She went back with a little girl. She was meant to be taking trick-or-treating that night. Now, this is America, Wisconsin, rural Midwest. If that had been me and I'd been that 18, 19-year-old woman, I probably would have gone out and found my dad, my uncles, probably with a whole range of weaponry, and said, can you come in the car with me? At the very least, there's some bloke out there trying to scare people. Maybe you'll do a better job of scaring him with a load of guns than I'll go back there with a 10-year-old girl. But anyway, that's what she did. Went to see if they could see the creature. She saw a big dark hairy shape standing by the side of the road, so decided to go off again. Second sighting happened just the next month. A woman called Lorianne Endrizi. She was driving along, passed something slowly, saw some creature by the side of the road. Again, thought it was a large dog at first of all. But when she looked at it again, it had a classic sort of like werewolf sort of features, a mixture of like human-like and dog-like features. what she noticed was the whole thing was that, she was very, very aware that it had hands that seemed to end in claws, as opposed to it didn't have paws. And it was eating something. It was eating like a human would do by bringing its hands up to its mouth where it was eating. It wasn't particularly malevolent to her. It just looked as she was drove past slowly, and she went off. She went back, and then she sort of like that's when she sort of, the other thing she noticed was like the glowing eyes. She started talking to people, other people started coming forward with various stories, and there we go. That's what got Linda Godfrey, the woman who wrote the 3 books I mentioned earlier, involved. And at this point, again, it became a bit of a media circus. The local townspeople, those with shops and that stuff, like, werewolf capital of America, come and see. People were going around, driving around, trying to find it, and everything like that. And then just a bit of a media circus. So Wisconsin, Illinois is the other area where it comes through. And also, once it gets into it, and when more of these reports were coming out, now, wolf-like or dog-like is the main description, but you also hear a lot of people say about bear-like, and some people say very much about being distinctly werewolf-like. Quite often people ask, are you sure you're not reporting Bigfoot? And it's really quite emphatic where people say, no, this was not some sort of Sasquatch or Bigfoot-like entity, this is something very, very different. So, we had the Michigan Dogman as well, what I just mentioned. Go back. So the other stuff then was, around this whole area around like Bray Road, there was like other things were going on at the time, and other things were being reported and that. So there's one story of a 12-year-old boy at home, and a car came up one day, an anonymous black car with our fabled old friend, the man in black, trying to intimidate this boy into giving over his Labrador. Other people are reporting things like, this spate of animal killings in the area that seems to be not like predated upon by any of the local wildlife, such as lynx, bobcats, possibly native wolves, bears, but that they seem to be sort of like, they might have been decapitated, or there's one talk of a dog being almost like surgically opened up and the heart removed. So various almost like sort of like quite ritualistic killings. Occult graffiti had been appearing, was being reported. Some people speculated, was this creature the result of some form of occult practice? Had it been magicked, witched, whatever you want to say, into creation? Other things about then UFO reports have been reported, like lights appearing over graveyards, and was this all related? So there's various things, but it sort of like it sparked this whole sort of like anomalous phenomena that were reported. And then again, our other good old friend, somebody was saying like, there was this like, mystery rundown shack in the woods, and there was a guy who said that there was a lot of dead animals found around his farm, and he said that it's all part of my religion, get off my land, that sort of side of things. So lots of like stock folklore from sort of like quite rural areas. So these sightings carried on through 1989. There was 2 reports from dairy farmers. Actually, a farmer reported that he saw an animal in his fields that he sort of followed at a distance. He reported it as being very, very big in the chest area. Again, he thought it was a large dog at first. Was only walking on 2 legs, so walking on 4 legs, so he wasn't too worried about it. But he said it wasn't like any wolf he'd see or any dog. And he followed it, and the report was that then it disappeared into some rocks. Now, whether that meant it wove its way into some rocks and disappeared, as it disappeared from sight, or whether it sort of like dematerialised, there's no evidence on that. Just reports it disappeared within some rocks. I suspect it means it just sort of like it went out of sight. I think if it had been like absolutely sort of dematerialised, there would have been some follow-up on that. Another one of this time of a smaller creature, much more dog-like in appearance, but on 2 feet and only 5 foot tall, and again on its hind legs. Again, not particularly malevolent in any way. It looked at some children, the children ran off away from it, it took some steps towards them, and then it went off on its own, sort of thing. And a lot of these reports talk about something more like stockier bear type creatures. So we've got these like rangy, tall, athletic wolves, and then sometimes these more stockier bear-like creatures, or with bear-like tendencies, sort of things. So that was where the first one we got, was the Beast of Bray Road. And then there's like, what I've got to do now, there's two examples of like case studies I'm going to look at of some of the more, sort of like the well-known ones that have appeared. So this one is quite gruesome. It's called Between the Land Between the Lakes Between Killings. Now, these were historically two rivers that were dammed and formed essentially these two long reservoirs, and this area in between is called the land between two lakes. There are bridges up here that sort of like connect it to the mainland as such. Now this area is about 170,000 acres. There are 200 miles worth of trails. I can't remember, I think it's about 200 miles worth of like coastline around there, or beach line, whatever you want to call it. This is a huge area. Historically, it was always a very, very rural, quite isolated area. Now, when they made the dam, they evicted 700 very, very rural families in order to make it. So it's not inhabited as such anymore. The middle image is, again, of a reported dogman that was seen, I don't actually think in this area, but it was one that it was going around several years ago on the internet. Now you can see, so what people are saying here was like, this is almost like the head, the eyes, sort of the muzzle there, shoulders, I don't know what that is, but anyway, that's almost like this purported dogman. Like most of these things, I'm always pretty, is this another play on light, or is it something that was there? Maybe it's a sort of like collection of logs behind some foliage that look in a certain particular way. But anyway, this is what it's purported to be. The other thing about this area is people often talk about in this area, there's all these sort of like concrete bunkers that are they're sort of like they're blocked up. They're sort of like there's railings over them with heavy padlocks, or there's big iron doors and you can't go down into them. And there's all the stories then about government experimentation, all sorts of things like that. What's going on in these sort of areas. So it's got this more recent mythos. The dams were put up in 1959. And one of the things I said there, there's because of the nature of what it was like and everything, and it had been settled by European colonists since the early 1700s. And because of that, so this at that point, so it would have been near enough 250 years worth of European settlement, several thousand years Native American settlement if you look before that. There were these whole things that people at that time would have family cemeteries in their back gardens because that's where they did, Granddad Joe died and you buried him in the back garden, and then, 40 years later, his eldest daughter died and you buried her alongside it. So there's these whole things, this whole area had over 200 family cemeteries in there as well. When you get into that, you start getting in other stories come out about that, there's the stories of so this folklore had emerged over 250 years, as you would expect with any community. So there's stories of hauntings, Native American curses, mystery lights again, hag-like witches who lived in little shacks way out in the woods, and of course the wolf-like creatures. These stories, they were essentially very isolated to that area until people started going into the area recreationally in the 1950s, and these stories started coming out. And at that point, they realised that the oral tradition was going back at least 100 years. So people were telling stories that had been told to them by their grandparents and great-grandparents. One of the stories for the Wolfman was a shape-shifting Native American medicine man who was a lot of trouble. For essentially, and what happened, the story went, was that a group of Native American warriors and some colonists joined up, went out to hunt down this medicine man, shot him, but within his dying breath put a curse on the area. So this is where the Indian curses come from. Another one, a settler story, is based about, they said, about a deceased settler who'd come from somewhere in Europe, and essentially he would turn mad of a night and would go out and just go crazy during the night. And this affected all of his children, genetically, I suppose. And so the whole thing was, it was this like some form of moon madness, you know, very much tied into, again, Western, Northern European folklore about, you know, what happens to some people when the moon comes out, werewolf, you know, so you can see sort of like the link that come down. And again, everybody agreed, whatever this creature was, it definitely was not a Bigfoot. There's no real history of Bigfoot within this area. It's very much about the Wolfman. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm trying not to do this, but I wanted to do this time, because the story is so good, it makes a great horror story, if nothing else. So this story was reported from, apparently happened in 1982. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it's a good story anyway. So I'm not going to read the whole thing out because it's quite long, but I'm going to read like the relevant parts. So this refers to two police officers. They had gotten a call to help with an investigation at one of the many rural campgrounds down in the land between the lakes. The tourist season was about to start in a few weeks, so as usual there were some early arrivals that had come to claim prime camping spots before the areas were overrun with tents, campers and travel trailers. The sun was setting low in the sky when they arrived at the scene. Several other official vehicles were already there, and there were many more to come, as they would soon find out, many coming from other counties and a few coming all the way from another state. It's quite odd. Several of these to come were coroners from different counties. One coroner vehicle was already present, as well as an ambulance, which would prove useless as there was no one to save. The victims were all dead. Completely, totally and thoroughly deceased. A young married couple that had come down to take it easy for a few days were the first to discover the ghastly scene. Neither one of them wanted to stay behind while the other went for help, so they both nervously travelled to the nearest town, Grand Rivers, and called the authorities. They did not return to the land between the lakes. They merely gave the arriving officer directions to the area of discovery and rented a local hotel room. With the sun going down, it got dark pretty fast, so there was a flurry of floodlights till the cruisers being pointed in all directions, along with the excited movements of $50 flashlights being held by nervous, restless hands, searching the trees, the ground, the leaves, the shadows. There was a parked motorhome at the site, its frame being lit by a campfire close by, a fire that had almost gone out on its own, but had been rekindled by the new crowd of men in uniforms so that they could have more light. The front and back doors of the home were open, one of the doors hanging by one hinge in a crooked slant. Through the window, they could see zigzag movements of luminosity as the beams of flashlights searched the interior. Bloody handprints slid down the thin metal walls close to the front door, and more bloody hand paintings could be seen along the length towards the back door. Their images danced eerily in the firelight of some ancient tribal symbols. Adam and Bill, two police officers, did not even want to imagine what was inside the motorhome. But then again, they would soon find out that it wasn't what was inside, but what was outside that would change their lives forever. There was already crime scene taking place in numerous scattered parts of the area, and little white flags on metal stakes into the ground marking evidence of ripped clothing, bodies and body parts, separated limbs, a pile of bowels, pieces of loose flesh clinging to muscle tissue, and what used to be three bodies that just hours before had been a happy family on a happy occasion to create happy memories for years to come, a father and a mother and a young son. Upon further inspection, the first arriving coroner, the wounds on the bodies were determined not to have been caused by a sharp instrument, but rather by some piercing, well-defined claws, and other wounds by some keen, mordantly long incisors. Wildcat, bear, wolves, the coroner shook his head in baffled disagreement with each guess from the officers. The claw marks, for instance, on the back of the father's corpse were distinctly made by 4 long claws and a smaller digit, like a thumb on the side. Its span was wider than the man's print, wider and different than a bear's mark, with deep, deliberate gouges in the flesh. Rape marks from an angry, unknown source trying to grab its prey that was no doubt trying to escape. The wildcat and wolf's theory was dismissed as the open wound marks were apparently made by a more grandiose animal source. The bite marks were much larger than the mountain lion, wolf or coyote. Whatever did have had a longer snout and more sizable teeth. There were also indications in the larger areas of the cadavers of bite marks where the flesh, meat and bone had been yanked away from the body, like a human who bites into the apple and leaves the impressions of its bite and teeth marks. So were the open wounds on these individuals. Bears, well, they aren't native to the area, but who knows? Maybe a grizzly did sneak in some way, but that was far-fetched. He would have had to travel several states and cross several rivers to even get close to this part of Kentucky. Everyone present was betting on the bear hypothesis anyway, and no one even thought of anything else to be the cause of such a savage attack. A bear, so a bear it had to be. From the back home of the door of the motorhome, an officer stepped down slowly, holding in his hands some type of garment, a dress, a small dress that would have to fit a small girl of around 5 years old. He informed the onlookers that there were more little girls' clothes packed inside the coach. This meant there was a missing person or an absent body, a member of the family. They all prayed she was still alive somehow, hiding somewhere, and a new search began. From somewhere in the nearby woods, about 50 yards from the campfire, a scream was heard. A man's shriek that turned into a long wail and then to whimpering. As others arrived, they could see by the gleam of several flashlights that the cop was holding his hat in one hand and his light in the other. There was blood on his face and the front of his shirt, and on the brim of his hat, more blood could be seen dripping on him. It was coming from above. High in the trees, the flashlights swung, searching for the source of a mysterious bleeding. A very small hand could be seen dangling down from a tree limb, was way up high, as well as a slender, lifeless leg that still had a white sock on the foot. The missing child had been located. It had been added that the blood had been trickled upon, hitting his hat first, making him look up and feeling the thick, cold fluid sprinkling his face, then sliding down to his newly buttoned shirt. It had been added that had screamed. The little girl had apparently been carried up a tree and leisurely eaten upon while carefully laid across a large tree branch. More of the same long grey and brown hair was found sticking to the bark and the tree in her body. It goes on and on like that, more flowery, quite language. Whoever wrote this story, obviously, is able to write a good story. So whether that is pure eyewitness testament, I don't know. It could have been very, very good eyewitness testament that was then related to somebody else who added the more flowery stuff. It doesn't sound like a pure report from police officers to me. But again, it's sort of like it conjures up a good story, a good sort of thing. What happens? The police officer untraceable. Apparently, one commits suicide a year later after what you see. Quite plausible, but again, there's no evidence trail to prove that. But again, quite interesting, and may have some sort of basis in fact. There's another story, I'm not going to read those bits, but essentially from 1978, 4 years previously, 3 children, 17-year-old girl, 10-year-old girl, and a 13-year-old boy. The 2 girls are at home waiting for their brother to turn up. They hear he's got one of them small little motorbikes, and they can hear him coming along at a distance, quite fast. I think it's quite unusual because he doesn't go that fast when he's coming near to the house. So they look at him, they see him racing along. He stops at one point on sort of like a small hill above the house, looks back at him, terrified look on his face, back on the bike, zooms straight back to the house. As they're looking, the girls are looking, they see a creature, wolf-like, human-like, on 2 legs, on the brow of the hill, sniffing the air, looking up. They all run in the house, they lock the door, they bring the dogs in with the dogs start growling. The dogs are terrified, don't want to go into themselves in the bedroom. They hear what they imagine to be this creature moving around the house, trying to get in. A little while later, they hear They stand with their aunt. They hear their aunt's car pull up. The aunt bibs on the door. She's told them she'll bib when she arrives, and the kids are to come out when she to help them bring the shopping in. They don't do that. Next thing they hear, the keys going in the door. It's their aunt saying, "Well, where are you? You know, what's happening?" But they speak this to their aunt. Aunt doesn't say anything. The next day she speaks to their dad, and dad comes in, and then, you know, sometime later, dad and another man go in. They're ex-Marines. They go looking in the woods. They find all these things of like these, you know, these big areas where animals, like wild animals, are laying are dead in various stages of dismemberment, and they're quite worried by it because this doesn't look like natural, normal animal kill. Again, it's one of those stories that the kids are told to, you know, don't ever go out into the woods again, you know, not without adults and things like that. Why this great big hulking werewolf decided to stop with the aunt, again, is one something I don't imagine an aunt is any more terrifying than three teenagers. Then again, thinking of some of my aunts, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to cross any of them sometimes. So that's where that's. So this is the land between the lakes. So this is on, you know, it seems to be ongoing, but it's a lot more difficult to find out information online about these American dogmen that is said about Bigfoot. You know, you find the same sort of stories seem to crop up most of the time. So going on to the next one, the gable footage. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly flick, if I can, to the next scene, and I think it will play immediately. So when it does, what I want you to think of, and it's a bit of audience participation here, when to think about what you see. I'll play it a couple of times and see whether you think dog-like, bear-like, man in a costume, or none of the above. Okay, so if you have a look at it a couple of times, I'm just going to ask you which of those you think. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot and say, why do you think that? I'm just curious to see what you think. Oops, sorry, I can't go, let's go through that all now. So it does go slow quite first of all. Oops. So this is what we're looking for here. It does move. Here we go. Teeth. Okay. Throat, I'm imagining. More teeth and gums. Okay. Right. Okay, it's slow, so that don't necessarily need to. Okay, shows me first of all, dog-like. 1, 2,
first bit, yeah.
3, 4. Okay. About 5 or 6. Bear-like.
For the second part.
Okay. Well, okay. Man in a costume. Yeah. Okay, great. And none of the above. Okay, great. Interesting. Thanks for participating and humouring me there. So, before I go on to any results of that, I'll go through a little bit about the origin of it. So, again, classic bit of found footage. Apparently this was found by a guy called Steve Cook, who was a disc jockey for, I don't know, Michigan radio or Michigan FM, whatever you want to call him. Apparently found it in a garage sale, took it as a trail of other, pile of other stuff and took it. And that's how it came about. So it's very much like, where it comes from. It's very mystery about where it actually came from and how it ended up where it did. So it follows the found footage format, something that, it's non-traceable in a sense. It's also within the online community as such, if you want to call it that. It's had, one of the terms has termed it, it's been called the Blair Dog Project. That's one of the things that people have said. Speculative date. Some people said that it's the ending part of a sequence that's about 9-10 minutes long. And the first bits, it's nothing to do with that. It's almost about people out on driving through woods. It's like, out playing with a dog. It's like, I think it's a bit of people might be on snowmobiles or quad bikes, something like that. And so people sort of, looking at the car, and they dated it apparently as sort of mid to late 1970s. That's what what they're saying is it's actually showing. So, theories. It was furiously debated online between about 2007 and 2009. People saying it was evidence of the Wolfman. Some people saying it looked like a chow. I think it looks a bit like an Ewok on 4 legs. And various different people saying all sorts of different things about what actually is it. Again, somebody said a man in a costume. And there was a lot of it. Was really debated. It was the fact that it was debated for a long time. There's a lot of questions. One thing that was going around was that there's one point is that the movement would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for a human to mimic at some point. Other people had said things that what was it? Sorry, mind block there a minute. Something to do with the movement. At one point, all 4 paws, hands, whatever you call it, all 4 limbs are off the ground, and that would be impossible for a human to mimic. So that's why it had a lot of debate going on about it. Now, hoax. Apparently, the TV series Monster Quest found out that Steve Cook, the guy who found the film, apparently fabricated it with his friend, who's a filmmaker called Mike Grossi, and they did it deliberately. Apparently there was a song on the radio called Legend that was all about the Michigan Dogman, and they did it more or less as some sort of way to sort of like give that some sort of like oomph and sort of like development of that. And that's where it sort of like came from, sort of the idea. So beyond that point, it seems to have just like died a death now. I can find very, very little. There's no more debate after that point. From the point of like that Monster Quest program in 2010, people have actually said, that's it now. It's all over and done with. I don't really know what to think. I think that's probably true, but I don't know for sure. But again, for me, it's just like, it's quite good in terms of that thing of like, whether it's a hoax or not, it's good at keeping that thing alive. And I'd rather there were people out doing that than, me being having to bored to tears for 5 minutes watching 5 minutes of Celebrity Love Island when I could be debating something like this for like hours and days with different people about different things, So I think to me, good luck to them. But yeah, as I said, it's still very, very difficult to find any information about it. And as I already mentioned about the movement of the subject, which seems to be the main thing. But for me, to me, it's definitely real. It's either a dog or a bear. I would have gone for the bear. That's what it looks more like to me. So I've already talked about the debunking. Has it been debunked? Hasn't it been debunked? Who knows? There's the film again. So, America is not new to cryptid, tricky, devious, problematic, dog-like entities. It's quite unusual, and the fact is that, there are, I think, Richard will probably know this better than me, there are probably more wild cat species in North America than wild canids. Bobcat, lynx, cougar.
There is puma, the bobcat, the jaguarundi, very rarely the jaguar, and no, there's more dogs.
Is there? Okay.
There's more canids.
Okay. So there are more canids, but interestingly, in terms of Native American folklore, canids have a much more ingrained sense than do cats, for whatever reason. Now, coyote is the one that comes up quite a lot. Now, it's often termed in terms of, like, depending on whatever Native American language you come to, old man coyote is the common term. He's a trickster, he's a teacher, he's a meddler, he's generally what we would call a metaphor for human existence. And in that respect, he's very much seen as a teacher. He possesses all of the qualities and vices of human beings. One of the underlying, one of the stories is that he actually, the gods when they first appeared, kept fire from human beings. Coyote didn't think this was fair, tricked the gods out of fire and gave it to human beings. Now that's not every tribal tradition, that's some tribal traditions about what happened there with Coyote. In terms of how he's portrayed, he's generally anthropomorphic. So it will generally be something like a human being with coyote-like ears or a coyote tail or something along those lines. Almost always male, very rarely will coyote be portrayed as a female, which is the opposite of spider, which often fulfills which has a similar role with many Native American traditions, but spider is almost always female. Myths vary from tribes to tribes. Lots of comparisons with Loki from Norse tradition, Prometheus from Greek mythology, Anansi from West African stuff, and our very own fox, in terms of getting into sort of like tricky situations and being able to get out of them, and getting into various types of mischief. He can be a major creative source in certain societies, and he can also be rather comical as well, so it's quite comedic. He's also symbolic of dangerous sides of human beings, so in terms of lechery, greed and sloth. At various points in some traditions, he raped his mother-in-law and his sister at one point, so he's also seen as a moral arbiter of something about things that you should not do. So in that context, he's very, very human. He's not a good guy or a bad guy, which again is very, very common through most Native American beliefs. Very rarely is something purely good or purely bad. Everything has that ability to change and fluctuate. In comparison, then we have wolf, which is the other major canid in Native American tradition. Wolf is a much more positive role. Wolf is often, he's associated, or she is associated with family, loyalty to family, the whole pack sort of mentality, respected as being a hunter, a protector of their family. The stories of about wolves looking after human babies. Realistically, they're more likely to eat them if they find them. But there's also that whole thing of stories around the world where wolves have taken on children and things like that. So there's that sense of it, to the point that quite a lot of the tribes that have clan systems, and the clans will often be usually named after animals or plants. At least the Cherokees and the Mohawks, well, all of the Iroquois tribes will have wolf clans. So again, a respected sort of thing within the role. So very, very different from coyote. Then we also have things like Wendigo, Rougarou, and the skinwalker. Wendigo is typical of the northeastern Canada into the Great Lakes region and sort of central northern Canada. Now, the Wendigo's association with Dogman is very, very tenuous. It's not very, very clear. Wendigo is never a particularly good spirit. Actually, he's always bad. So a Wendigo is its main purpose, if you want to call it that, is to so it's motivated by insatiable greed. In more modern terms, that becomes like environmental destruction. So that whole thing of like wanting more than you can possibly need. And again, it's something a bit like a metaphor for human existence, about, you know, eventually you'll destroy yourself through your own greed. So don't do that. Whether you destroy yourself morally or physically, that doesn't really matter, but one of those ways you will actually do. Now the Wendigo is described as generally this emaciated but very, very strong cannibal spirit. And so it's associated with murder, insatiable greed, and also where those cultural taboos come through. Now there's a modern medical term that's debatable called Wendigo psychosis. So when people essentially have cannibal fixations and see themselves as cannibals, whether they act on that and that. It's actually in certain circles seen as like Wendigo psychosis. So it's been adopted into that. So again, Wendigos, Rougarous and skinwalkers are all seen as punishers. A Rougarou probably comes from the French term loup-garou, so wolf, which is essentially a werewolf. It's quite a localised area, very, very close to where the Dogman comes from, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, where a lot of the old French trappers established themselves. And so in that border area between the USA and Canada, they mixed with the Indians, and Rougarou is probably a Native American translation of that. Now, the first time I heard of it was this chap here. He's called Leonard Peltier, still serving life in an American prison. He was a member of the American Indian movement. He was accused of killing 2 FBI agents in the 1970s. And he talked in the book that I read about him, he talked about when he was a child growing up on the reservation, of going home of a night and running through the woods for fear that the Rougarous would get him. Now there was some debate at that time, it was like, are the Rougarous was just the local name for Bigfoot? But I'm wondering now whether, because of that, and the translation from the French loup-garou, whether that was actually, in terms of, does actually mean werewolf. So yeah, I talked about the psychosis theory. So you may remember the killing of Tim McLean. July 20,008, on a Greyhound bus going through Manitoba in the northern provinces of Canada. Tim McLean, young guy, I think he's about 22, asleep on the bus. Guy gets on another stop called Vincent Lee, described as this very tall, slim Chinese Canadian. Gets on the bus. Initially, he just sits down at the front of the bus. He's there for a few hours. Then he gets up and he moves back towards the bus. Sits next to Tim McLean. Tim McLean's asleep. He's got his earphones on, listening to music, whatever he's doing. Then Vincent Lee gets out a knife, stabs him, cuts his head off, dismembers parts of him, starts eating him. All of this, while the stab's going, obviously people are around and alert the driver first of all. So everybody's tearing off the bus, pulls over. The driver manages to lock the bus, so Tim McLean's already dead by this. I think hopefully, mercifully, he must have died at the first or second stab wounds, I'm hoping. But so everybody's off the bus, they're in the middle of nowhere, they can't go anywhere. So this guy Vincent Lee has already decapitated Tim McLean and is walking around showing people outside the head. He's cutting off bits of the body, tongue, I think nose, various bits, and he's eating them in front of him. All the time people say he's very, very calm, his face is very, very impassive, there's nothing like again, it doesn't seem to be giving anything away. Some months, about a year after that, I was reading something about, looking into that, like what actually happened. And that area of Manitoba is, most of the people who live up there still will be Native Americans or Native Canadians at this point. And they were very, very clear about what this was. They said, like, this guy has been overtaken by a Wendigo spirit. That's what he said. He seems to do everything we do. He's cannibalising the body for no good reason. He just wants to kill and eat. There's no other basis for it. So this is where it comes in for the Wendigo, and whether there is something that Wendigos are said to sometimes take wolf-like or dog-like forms. Again, also has its notions in witchcraft, particularly with skinwalkers. Skinwalkers are shapeshifters known throughout most Native American cultures. They've been particularly strong basis in the southwest of the states, in the desert states actually, and particularly amongst the Navajo. That may well be because native traditions amongst the Navajo are still very strong in many respects, as strong as what they were 1,000 years ago. So there hasn't really much changed there. And that may well be why skinwalkers are still reported. Skinwalkers will take any animal forms, but are often said to take wolf-like or coyote forms. And again, very much in terms of how this will be different in terms of from a Western concept to a native concept. One of the stories I most liked, where again it was a Navajo guy who was talking about, same old story, going along the road one evening around dusk and seeing people, seeing two skinwalkers by the side of the road. But these two skinwalkers are decided, it's like two guys in jeans, white shirts with ties, with coyote or wolf-like heads, and they're both smoking fags. And it was just like, so this is that's very, very typical. So it's talking about how, it wouldn't necessarily, from a Native American perspective, had these huge hulking monsters. It looked like more comedic more than anything else. So yeah, it goes into shape-shifting. And then if any of you have seen the 1978 film Wolfen, I think it's a great film, still stands the test of time. Again, these creatures that are wolves but aren't wolves, and how about they have a spiritual element, but they're also very part of the physical world. So going into the zoological side of crypto, there are a number of other sort of like mystery canids that regularly appear in America. Well, actually, no, they don't regularly appear, so I wanted to highlight. So, whoops. The one at the top, this is something apparently called Shunka Warakin. Now, apparently the Shunka Warakin, I can only ever find about 3 reports in the historical record of Shunka Warakin, which is unfortunate. It's the same for many of these cryptid creatures. There's mostly, a lot of the time, it's not like Bigfoot that there are probably numbers in the tens of thousands of reports now. Tasmanian tiger, thylacines, at least in the high hundreds, if not low thousands of reports.
4,000.
4,000 reports of thylacines. So it's these ones like the Shunka Warakin one at the top, only about 3 or 4 reports I could find, and the Wahila, only about 3 or 4 reports. Now, when it comes into these, the Shunka Warakin apparently comes from the Iowa Indian word to carry off dogs. I think that's complete nonsense. For the simple reason, it was said apparently to an Iowa Indian. The Iowa speak a Siouan language, of which Shunka is the Siouan word for dog. That would make sense. Warakin does not bear any resemblance to the term to carry off. To carry off in Siouan languages is yuha. So it will be a variation, but I think yuha and Warakin are very, very different. The other thing that makes me suspicious is that Warakin looks too much like the Lakota Indian word wakan, which means holy. I think someone's been playing around with that for their own ends, really. But again, it's the whole thing, it may describe Perhaps looking at that, I think hyena that maybe from a travelling circus that died somewhere out and became part of the local folklore. The other thing was talked about, it was like these weird wolves, a weird sort of wolf that had come in. The wahila is talked about as being like this big bear-like dog, bigger than a normal wolf, with a broad head, broad shoulders, always white. Apparently hunts in packs in Michigan. That's one story I've heard, nothing else about Michigan, but more likely to be reported in northwestern Canada, the Northwest Territories, and been seen up there. But again, very, very sketchy reports, not very much. Now the other thing I was going to find quite interesting, again from a Native American perspective, was the Cheyenne tribe is made up of 10 historic bands, governed by a council of 44 chiefs, and governed in a different way by 6 warrior societies. One of the warrior societies was this lovely sounding word there, Otamatanea, which means dog people, not dog men, not dog soldiers, dog people. Now, we know the Cheyennes, they're fighting on the Great Plains with the US cavalry in this area through the mid-19th century. But historically, they came from this area, which is where all the Dogmen sightings are from. So I'm wondering whether the term dog soldiers actually has its forbearance, or somewhere it actually comes through something to do with that, given that the dog soldiers were renowned to be the fiercest and most implacable of the Cheyenne warrior societies. Did this mean things like it related that to these rather quite terrifying beasts that they might have brought with them as their own folk memory from these northern woods? So again, what happened when the Europeans came? So if we look at these 2 maps here, you can look at the areas, the dark areas at the top here, again where the Dogmen are reported from, is where the large numbers of French settled. If we look at this area as well, a similar sort of area, a little bit further west, but the same sort of like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan area, is where people from the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, will settle. Very, very close to the areas, and there's a lot of symmetry there. I'm wondering whether there was some sort of like cultural mixing that came on this went. So, back to Rougarou. Where did this term come from? The Rougarou, werewolves, was that the way that they understood Bigfoot or not? Also, a lot of the French people at the time would have been aware of the Beast of Gevaudan. You probably all heard, a lot of you might have heard of the Beast of Gevaudan, wolf-like or sun-like, carnivore-like creature that terrified large parts of, or a small part of France, for quite a few years, and whether people were bringing their own stories of that when they were coming up against these creatures, where they'd already had some sort of like cultural framework for which to understand that. In terms of the Nordic people, were they, again, their memories of things of like the berserkers, some of the old Viking warriors who put on bear skins and I believe took some form of hallucinogen, if the recent Bernard Cornwell book I read is anything to go by, in order to become sort of like as ferocious as bears or wolves when in their fighting. And if this came through with the Norse, and that's why, again, there's some sort of link there. Again, when you mentioned Loki, the Norse would have had their own sort of folk stories about the Norse, whether they were Christian or not. Is it one of these terms about people making sense of Bigfoot? They are seeing Bigfoot in the woods, but what they're doing, they're making sense of them by calling them Rougarous, or whatever, and how they're trying to make sense of that. So, going on to this, the other big guys and the gals. So, how to spot the difference, something like that. Bigfoot, Dogman, black or brown hair, 8 to 10 feet tall, up to 1,000 pounds, knocks trees, throws stones, mostly shy yet curious. Dogman, pretty much just an arsehole. Now I didn't put this up there, this was come, I found this online, I quite liked it. So there is some geographical overlap. There's quite a lot, Bigfoot is reported along the whole of America as a whole, the whole of North America. Dogman is much more localised in this north Midwest area, but does appear in various other parts. Interestingly, the eastern Bigfoot is reportedly to be more aggressive than the more traditional Bigfoot over in the northwest coast. Now, one theory I read online, and I don't really regard much I read online with much credit, but one thing I actually did say was that is this because they're involved in some form of like a competitive war with the Dogman, and therefore that they're vying for sort of like territory, resources and things like that. It could be true if we're dealing with two from a biological point, if we're doing two clear biological entities, then that would probably make some sort of sense that you're probably dealing with two apex predators, but as we don't know the nature of either of them, we can't really say. I've already mentioned about the baboon Bigfoot earlier, and some of these times in Patrick Huey's and Lauren Coleman's book about mystery primates of the world, talked about some of these monkey-type creatures having baboon-like faces, and I'm wondering whether they are juveniles or smaller versions of the Dogman. The other one is that are they both, they're different visitors from other rooms into ours. Essentially, are they aliens or, this lovely term, intradimensional or interdimensional beings that walk around the universe as they see fit? I don't know enough about that sort of stuff. I hated physics at school. I have no interest in finding more about it now. But it's one of those things actually, sort of like, is there some sort of like, can they be explained in that sort of way? So, yeah, some people have said that, well, they're both not of this world in a purely biological format, but they both visit from perhaps the same place or from different places. So there is a thing called the North American Dogman project in America. We do have a website up and running. It's not great, but it's developing. I don't have everybody's got to start somewhere. It has a website, it has sightings, evidence, podcasts, it's developing. It has a much smaller readership, if you want to call that, than Bigfoot, but it's beginning to grow. They have a Facebook presence. They do research and investigation. I think that's mostly like people dressing up in combat gear and then going out into the woods, putting some tents up, frying steaks and then talking, but they're doing stuff. They've also got, interesting, they've got a section on the UK Dogman, back again, which is just, I'm just coming near to the end now. I just wanted to, there's a thing I read about the UK Dogman a few years ago. We need to keep quiet, we're going to have another show of hands at the end of this. So the story I read online was right in the north of England, I think in Kielder Forest, a group of special armed soldiers were on manoeuvres up there, and they were apparently it was all very like hush hush, it was SAS or something like that. And apparently one group of soldiers actually found a cottage hidden away in the woods, and when they went there, they found that there'd been another group of soldiers there who were apparently had all been killed by some mysterious force or creatures, blood everywhere. It looked like an animal attack, and it was really quite hideous. Okay, can I have a show of hands if any of you have heard that story before? Okay. Have any of you seen the film Dog Soldiers? And this is my point here, any idiot can put whatever they want on the internet and can say it's a valid story. Now I think this guy, whoever he was not the brightest light on Broadway, because he must have put that down. I think no one else had ever watched that film apart from him. So I just think it's a bit ridiculous that they do that. But I think it's why I always encourage people to be open-minded but sceptical, particularly of anything you read on the internet. I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier. I was just saying about, I love Bigfoot, and I will read everything I can about Bigfoot, but there is so much crap out there now. Like, I've been spending pounds and pounds and pounds on books that just tell me absolutely nothing. So it's always about advice. Anyway, ran over. So, possibilities for Dogman. Is it an unknown species that we know nothing about? Is there been some animal that's human dog-like that walks around on two legs, 4 legs on occasionally, and just is awaiting official classification by science? Is it a misidentification of known species behaving or looking oddly? Is it that we are actually looking at a wolf or a dog, or sometimes a bear, walking around on all fours, or something else? Are they visitors from unknown places, the universe, the hollow earth? Do we need to question the nature of physics about what these creatures are? Again, is this a folk tradition upon folk tradition? And it's more about cultural merge and understanding. I'm sort of like verging more on this one personally. People bringing their own folk stories, and that, if you think perhaps particularly people coming from Europe to settle in North America, it can be quite comforting to bring your own sort of like stories and traditions with you in a very, very alien land. Are all these people hallucinating? Again, it's what everybody who's interested in our field is always like, people are just hallucinating. Some of them might be, some of them probably aren't. And again, is it all deliberately made up? Well, somebody deliberately made up the film Dog Soldiers, and then somebody deliberately made up the story to say it was true. So yeah, I think some of it is all deliberately made up.